Well, hello everyone. Welcome and glad you're joining us here for another Basic Conversation. And Father Basic, today we're going to talk about Pope Leo as an Augustinian.
Pope Leo XIV, yeah.
Yes.
We can talk about him in a lot of different ways. And he just wrote an encyclical. I don't want to get into that at all, but eventually, and he also was a missionary in Peru. We can, in other words, we can come at him in different ways.
Right.
We can come at him as picking the name Leo, following Leo XIII. We can come at him as a person who's from Chicago, south side of Chicago, and therefore is not a Cubs fan, but
Very much a White Sox fan.
yes, for sure. So today, so I want to stay on the topic of the fact that he joined the Augustinian order. So in the Catholic Church, there's different orders, and we often think of them as having a particular charism or special rule. Like if you talk to people about the Jesuits, they think of great universities, their teachers. Talk about Franciscans, they're into poverty and helping the poor and so on. And so when we're talking about Augustinians, we want to see, what their distinctive charism is. That's what we want to try to look at. And to get at it, we need to know a little more about Saint Augustine.
Sure. Makes sense.
So I could spend the next half hour on background on Augustine, but you as the moderator will say, that's enough on Augustine. We're here to talk not about Augustine, but to talk about Leo.
But it makes sense to start with Saint Augustine for sure.
Yeah, it does in a way. So, Augustine, he's tremendously important in the history, the great doctor of the church. Someone once said that all of theology is nothing but a footnote to Augustine. And so we locate him a little bit. He died in 430 at an old age. He lived to be 75 years old. That's amazing in that culture. And he's from North Africa. That's important to say. Commonly thought of as sort of a playboy kind of guy, a philanderer, which is definitely not true. So when you talk about Augustine, we got to get rid of, he died in 430, okay? He's from North Africa. He was a teacher of rhetoric. He was fundamentally a professor, a teacher. And he was functioning in Milan. His mother was Monica. I often call her the original helicopter mother because she was always hovering over him and telling him what to do. In fact, at times he had to lie to her to get away from her. He would tell him that he's going someplace, and then he'd go someplace else just to get rid of her. So they had a wonderful relationship in the long run. But his mother was Monica. They're from Tagaste in North, so he's North African. So he, don't want to get into this too much, but he was not a playboy, not a philanderer. And I just reading articles recently, modern contemporary stuff saying that he was.
Well, how did he get that reputation? How'd that?
Not understanding the North African culture, I would say. He as a teacher of rhetoric and living in Milan, it was perfectly normal for him to have a mistress that was accepted, and it was not looked down upon in any way, part of the social fabric. And the thing is that he was really loved his mistress, loved her deeply, and was faithful to her. And when he became a Christian, there were various reasons he broke off that relationship, and he writes in his Confessions, I was heartbroken. So the book that's most revealing of who Augustine is his famous book, Confessions. It's the beginning of autobiography in the secular world. So he's telling his own story from his own point of view. They had a son together they named him Deodatus, which translated from the Latin means gift of God. And he loved his son. His son was brilliant, and he was so proud of him and so on. And he related to him as an adult later on in their life. So he writes in the Confessions about when he had to break off the relationship. At least he thought he had to. How brokenhearted he was. And he wanted her not to marry again, or not to share a bed with anybody else. He wanted her. Anyway, what was I going with all this? Augustine. How he became so influential in the church. Because the other great thinker in the church, we usually think of two great Western thinkers, Augustine, writer of the Confessions and so on, 430, and Thomas Aquinas, who died in 1274, who took Augustine and made it his own and related it to Aristotelian philosophy to produce his great Summa. So that became, even when I was in the seminary, we were studied out of his Summa, his great collection, Thomas Aquinas. So there was Augustine was present in that and became a great doctor of the church and most influential figure. So, yeah, I probably don't know if there's other stuff I want to say about Augustine. Yeah, I know what I wanted to say. He was, after his conversion, he was converted in 386, okay? Spent a year learning more about the faith and so on, listening to Saint Ambrose of Milan preaching and so on. And eventually then was baptized. See, in North Africa, he grew up, Monica was, very Christian, but in that culture, they did not baptize their children. They waited until we have groups today who wait till adulthood. And so Augustine was so interested in community. When he went after he was converted, he went back to North Africa, to Tagaste, where he was raised, and established a community there, along with his good friend Alypius. Alypius is in his story all the time with him. And as near as I can figure out, Deodatus became part of the community as well. So Augustine thought it was better to travel to God with friends, with a community. He always wanted a community to be with him, as friends, as guide, as together we will move towards God. Together we are better as a group than singly. So he was functioning like that. He made a community, and he wrote a rule, that is a directive on how his followers should live. And the major part of the rule was follow the two great commandments, love of God and love of neighbor. And do it as a community. Move together as a community. Be stronger together. And one time he was in Tagaste then, and his mother was dead now, and he was with his son and Alypius, his friend, and he visited Hippo, which was a bigger city right on the coast, on the Mediterranean coast. We're in North Africa now, right? And when he got there, they made him the bishop. It's, there was no pope who said, now, Augustine, you're the bishop of Hippo. We're assigning you to Hippo. The people did that. The people called him to be their bishop, and he could hardly refuse. I mean, they were clamoring for him to be their bishop. So it's an interesting way to become a bishop that had nothing to do with getting appointed by a pope. It had to do with the people's calling. Some people would like to see more of that in the church today, where dioceses or where people could call forth their... And so when he moved to Hippo, he again established a community there of followers. Lived to be 75. I mean,
That's a good run for that time frame, right? That time era.
For sure, yeah.
One of the things in his book, Confessions, the imagery that he comes with, and I think it's maybe a tie-in to Pope Leo XIV, is this idea of a restless heart.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of famous quotes from Augustine. You could Google the 100 best quotes from Augustine. It is a way to get at him. Probably one of his most famous was that, Lord, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. You've made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless till they rest in thee. Leo has quoted that in some of his talks. In fact, I think at least 10 times in his pontificate since Leo became Pope, he has quoted Saint Augustine. He's not shy about his roots, and we got to get back to that. I'm trying to lay the groundwork enough. So, there's all kind of famous quotes from Augustine. Late have I loved thee, O beauty, ancient and ever new. Ever ancient, ever new. O beauty. Very, of course, he had some he had some sort of humorous ones too. He once prayed, Lord, make me chaste, but not yet. Let's not rush into this self-constraint business, but not yet. He said, to sing well is to pray twice. Oh, there's a bunch of them. I'll go on forever, but maybe that gives a little flavor for Augustine. Okay, Leo. That's why we're talking.
The foundation is set. Here we go.
Yeah. You got a question about Augustine, about his life, about... He reconciled with Monica. I mean, that was a tough relationship. As I said, he was deceitful in dealing with her, but they had a magnificent religious experience together after his conversion. They were looking out a window into a garden area, and they both were filled with the Spirit and so on. But let's go back to the conversion experience itself. So he's living in Milan. Okay, we're in 386. He's living with Alypius, his good friend. And they were visited by some missionaries and who seemed to be full of life and joy and so on. He was listening to St. Ambrose, and he was trying to deal with what we call today Manichaeanism. In the 3rd century, there was a teacher called Mani, M-A-N-I, who created what we called this whole movement. It was a very rational, dualistic Manichaeanism. Their teaching was there were 2 big principles, good and evil, and history is the 2 interacting. Personal life is the good and the old, the great Satan against the power of good. And it was very rationalistic. I would call it a rationalistic dualism. 2 principles that are governing the whole history of the world. One good, one satanic. And that fight is going on in the world history. And Mani had an explanation for everything. And Augustine was into Manichaeism for many years. And part of his confession, some people think, is to try to play that down. I mean, he was sort of, I think, embarrassed by it. But he was into it for sure. He was reading it, talking about it, buying into it. And in his confessions, he's trying to tell us, well, I wasn't that much of a Manichaean. But a lot of scholars think that he really was.
We're making our way to Pope. Yeah, we're making our way.
But that seems somehow important, Manichaeanism.
Yes.
Yeah. So they didn't like Christians. Nani didn't like Christians because they talked about mystery. So on. Okay, we're down Pope Leo the 14th, south side of Chicago, right? Yeah. First U.S. Pope. Is It's quite remarkable. And so he's been at it for about a year now. And I think he's doing great. He's getting a lot of publicity, that's for sure. And he's not afraid and so on. So he went to Augustinian schools. It's a whole Augustinian thing. Um, he went, in fact, he went right up in Dundee, Michigan. He was in Dundee, Michigan.
What was that?
That was like a seminary.
Seminary.
Yeah.
Is that building still there?
Augustinian Seminary.
Is that that's not there now, right?
I don't know that. Yeah. I sort of think it is, but I don't know that. But there's people in Toledo who talk about knowing Bob Prevost as a friend and a nice guy and a good seminarian, and with many other people in Toledo. Bob Prevost was a friend of mine.
He probably has a lot of friends that he didn't.
Yeah, really. He got more friends than we knew about.
Yeah.
So there's that memory. And then he goes to Villanova, great Augustinian school. I've been there and interacted with them at times. It's just a marvelous Augustinian tradition there. And he studied mathematics. How's that? Well-rounded guy, that's for sure. And then after Villanova, he entered the order. When you enter the order, you go through a novitiate, a period of time when you're supposed to be learning about the order and so on. And then he eventually was ordained a priest, an Augustinian priest. And as an Augustinian, he was sent to Peru. And that's the talk of another time. So he's thoroughly Augustinian in his DNA. And what I think, all the religious orders have charisms. That's a way of saying they're special in something. So what I say, Jesuits for education, Franciscans for poverty, and for Augustinians, the big thing is community. So our hearts are restless, and until we rest in Thee, and we're on a journey, but we're better doing the journey together. You're better to have people with you who can support you and guide you and encourage you and so on. So to me, the big charism is to promote community, togetherness, and so on. And I think that in a way, that part of Leo is got special meaning for us in the United States today. Because, a lot of people, there's a growing number of men in our culture who say they don't have a close friend. Growing number don't have a close friend. What was it, Robert Putnam? Do you remember the book Bowling Alone? His study showed that more people were bowling, but they weren't bowling in a league. They weren't with others. I think of my parents at St. Catherine's Church growing up. My mother bowled in the St. Catherine's Women's League on Tuesdays. My dad bowled in the St. Catherine's Men's League on Thursdays. That's where they made their friends. That's where they knew people. They often socialized with those people otherwise. So the problem is that too many people are bowling alone. And Henry Nouwen, great spiritual writer, claimed that the great problem of the modern world, and contemporary world especially, was loneliness. People are feeling lonely, and they feel abandoned. And I think we're seeing that more and more. I mean, even the influence of the internet on your kids and their cell phones.
And adults too. There's an
Yeah,
isolating factor for adults, right?
yeah. So we got a problem, and Leo XI, U.S. Pope, is uniquely positioned to help us with that problem. That is the point, because that's the charism of his order. And I think before we have to, let's do it. So he's not hiding the fact that he's an Augustinian. I might be repeating now. I think there's at least 10 times he's repeated quotes from Augustine. He's mentioned him in his homilies. But he himself wants to live in community, like Augustine did in Hippo and in Tagaste. So what has he done? In March, he moved back into what we call the papal apartments in the Vatican apostolic place where the popes have traditionally lived. Let's put it that way. And what has he done? He's remodeled it and has moved into that papal apartment with other Augustinians. So he's living his charism and the whole idea. We're journeying to God, yes, but we're doing it as a community, and it's better doing it together.
It sounds like he's living with 4 other Augustinians, 2 of his private secretaries, and then 2 other Augustinians that I wasn't
I
familiar
can
with.
see that community growing over a period of time. So he's remodeled it so there's a room for each one of them. But he wants to be around people.
So what would that even look like community-wise? Does that mean at night maybe they have some time together, the prayer time? How does that look like?
Yeah, there would be time they would probably celebrate Mass together as part of the day. They'd probably gather to say the office together, the official breviary of the church. Then they would gather for social times. I know I've lived with the Jesuits both in England at Oxford and in New York, and their social hour in the afternoon was really important, where they would have an adult beverage, as they say, and there would be a lot of talk and chatter, and people would build friendships that way and get to know one another.
So
So
he's modeling this importance of community and walking together.
right,
Yeah.
he's modeling
He's
it
modeling
for us,
it.
and he's calling upon us to do that.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, well, how would we do that? Well, one way I was thinking a family could go to Mass together, and then as they're driving home or as they go out for brunch or as they settle into their home, they could take turns saying what they got out of the homily. In other words, we need people to do this. We need people who realize that religion is more important than politics, that morality plays a role in how we see the world. So, I mean, a lot of our conversation is based on the terrible polarization, partisanship, where there's things we can't talk about. We have friends, and we can't bring up anything political because it'll start a fight or on and on. So we remain silent about that. So we need more people who realize that religion is more important than politics, that the Christian faith is our moral guide and not partisan leadership. We need people who are open-minded enough to do that. So what I got, so a family was going to discuss it and so on. I could imagine in a parish where people would go out to eat together after Mass, say, go to brunch. I know people who do this, and they'll go out to people with people and talk about it. In other words, you have to have the opportunity for spiritual conversation. One of the solutions to the problem is to bowl in a league. No, that's a secular solution, and great, bowl in a league and don't bowl alone, you know. But I'm trying to think of it from a Catholic viewpoint. You could get people to join together, like say people in your parish that are into social justice and into pro-life. And so they go to Mass and they sit together on purpose, showing that they're united and so on, and then go out to eat after Mass or to talk about it. So we need people who are able to do that.
Yeah, and similar, if a group of people wanted to do some type of service project,
There you go.
I mean, that's faith in action, right?
Yes, I know people who go help out at a food distribution center, and they go together. They drive together, go there, help out, and they can talk about coming home. So, and it's a great point you brought up. So much of the charism of the Augustinians is not just that you pray together, but you serve together. Maybe some people would join a group that's into improving help for people living under poverty level. So they would go to serve together. Yeah, I know people like that. They drive across town to a shelter, to a place where they feed people, and they serve the food, and they do it together on purpose. So maybe one of the takeaways is, how could we all find ways to overcome our own isolation, find ways where we reach out to others, trying to find a best friend. Men in our country, many men do not have a best friend. So it might be one way of doing this is try to cultivate a friendship. You have to work at friendships. They don't just happen. It's not like romantic love. You fall in love and it all seems like it's going to work and you can do it. Friendship isn't like that. Friendship develops over a period of time where you're faithful and where you get along and where you understand one another, where you can talk when you feel encouraged. So we need to develop that sort of thing. So what my takeaway is that Pope Leo uniquely and providentially from the United States is showing us a way, inviting us to find our own way to live in community, to overcome loneliness, and to function, to be able to pray together. I know people who get together. They can't drive, and they have to do it by phone, but they get together and they pray together over the phone. They might say a decade of the Rosary, or they might say the Hail Mary together or something, and that's bringing them closer together. So there's the invitation, Brad. That's the what's the takeaway for ordinary people, Catholic people? Have somebody you can talk about, not the Tigers losing all the time, but talk about prayer life. Or how about confession? No, with the open confession now and face-to-face confession, that's an opportunity. And some people have taken that with working with me, I know. I'll ask them, is there anything you wanted to talk about? And very often, yeah, it's their chance to say, well, I've been trying to deal with my anger. I got an anger problem, and I want to try to do this. So spiritual direction through confession would be a good thing. So find a creative way to live the charism of the Augustinian order, which Leo himself is doing in his life, in his preaching, in his talking, and everything, and that all of us could do better.
Amen. Thank you, Father Basic.
Amen.